What's up, y'all? Today we talking about teacher pay, baby, and and it's gonna be quite interesting because I'm sure it's gonna be a lot of different ideas popping out today. But join us on the other side, South Star Classroom. What's up, good people? That's Omar. That's Jubilee. David will be joining us soon. I am Charles, and this is another episode of the South Star Classroom. Class is now in session, baby. So look, we have the queen or princess or whatever it is that she wants to be. She can be whatever she wants on this show. Everybody got their own little intro. I talk about Omar being an international man of mystery with the blackest hair in the industry. We got the beard of wisdom. So whatever you want to be, Jube, you can be. But today is Jubilee's show, so I am gonna shut up and get out the way and give her the screen because I don't want no problem. Look at David came with a shirt. That's what's up, man. With the all right, David. Okay.
Does he usually come shirtless? Oh,
nah, he got the nice suave collar on with the spectacles. You know what I'm saying? His beard is lined up. I mean, David out here.
Matching with Jubilee too. She's your queen to be. She's a vision of perfection.
Don't get me started. I'm going to go all the way there with you, Omar.
Good evening, man, and I appreciate that.
Good evening. It is so good to see all of you. Of course, we're going to check in just to see how everyone's doing, and then we're going to jump into today's topic. So, how are you? Let's start with Omar.
We can't hear you. You went out.
Yeah, you wanted to start with who?
I went out?
Start with
yes,
whom?
you did.
Oh my gosh.
With whom is some good ass grammar, man.
Who are we starting with?
Omar. I said with Omar.
I'm just gonna jump into this mother, man. How everyone doing, man? Doing all right, man. It is Thanksgiving week. So people got the week off. I'm very happy for the teachers who need a much needed reprieve. We all come back on Monday. I was just telling the Dr. Charles Cole that I was out in Denver, went to a Avalanche game. That's the hockey team. Super fun. And my compadre, which is my best friend, the dad to his daughter is my goddaughter, thus compadre. He was telling me that the difference between an Avalanche game and a Nuggets game is that at the Nuggets game, they padding everybody down, and they're not at the Avalanche game. And I'm like, that's an interesting demographic choice. Dr. Cole said he wasn't surprised. I'm still a little surprised, but I'm going to launch it back to the team here with Captain Green Shirt and Queen Green Shirt. See how their week is going.
I'm tossing it to you, David. So I guess we have this synergy going on here because we've got on the screen.
Yeah, apparently.
Feeling really earthy.
Yeah, it's that time. Yeah, it's good. Getting ready for the week. We got friends coming into town this afternoon, and so just getting the house ready. Did a bunch of yard work this morning, like chopped down a tree and laid down a bunch of rock. Like strongman work. And now I'm hurting. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. We also went on started going on high school tours. Last week we had our first high school tour because my son's in the 8th grade. And we visited our first school was unbelievable. Too much to talk about now, but it's a local San Diego charter school that was opened in 1998. So the charter law in California goes back to 96. So this is one of the first charters. The other interesting thing is that it was one of the first conversion charters to take a district school, get signatures of 90% or 95%, and they can flip it to charter. And the presentation was filled with all kinds of data and it was just it was unbelievable. Like their A through G rates, and they're this and they're that, and I was blown away. The son liked it too, so we'll see if we get in.
Hopefully you will.
Yeah.
Let's go that route. Thank you. Dr. Charles Cole III.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give this update, but it is a happy update. I need to say that before
it's
jump in.
about
So
time,
first,
man, we always got some sad ass updates.
Well, first, it was we had the BMEC, the Black Male Educators convening in Philadelphia, led by my good friend and former co-host Sharif El-Mekki. Just very proud of him, and it's just grown. Like, it started with like less than 30 people, and now it's like at capacity, and there's overflow rooms, and you get you got celebrities come in, you got really high profile people that's there. Like, I'm like, oh, Tay Diggs is just randomly on a panel. It's like, why? That's crazy. So it was pretty cool. So y'all know that my aunt was having some issues, and I said my goodbyes. And so we decided, her son, God bless him, had to make a really tough decision. So I had to go speak in Philly. They told me to go ahead and go. We were gonna cut the machine off on her Friday, and they FaceTime me in. So I do my talk, my presentation at BMAC. It goes really well. Then a little bit later, hey, it's time. They they FaceTime me, and we unplugged my aunt. Now I've never unplugged. I've never done that before. So I was in my mind. It was like, oh, I'm thinking the machine is what's having her breathe. She's just we're gonna unplug and she's gonna go. But that's not how that goes. Like, her body was still trying to do these things. So, but being able to witness that was just really it was really interesting, man. And I'm honored to have been able to witness it. I'm happy for her that she gets to finally rest. But that was a little difficult to watch. But again, my grandmother taught me this when she passed away. That's who raised me. Like, when people have earned their death, you celebrate when that happens. So, this is a happy message, but that's a cacophony of different feelings and vibes. So, but I'm very interested and excited about today's conversation. And it does not require a pat. It does not require a check-in or emotional piece. It was fine. We're going to just leave it there. And let's see if people can follow directions. So go ahead.
Man, I think Jubilee is not happy with that, man.
She's going to have to be.
All the check-ins, man.
She's going to have to be.
Damn.
And she's muted. So thank God she was
muted. It doesn't matter. I will say, may she rest in peace. Because that sounds like,
Yeah.
And you ain't gonna try to make it seem like I'm not emotionally intelligent, okay? I am the reason why you're so emotionally intelligent.
When Omar, when you just added this random person to our podcast, you know what I mean? Like, without, it's I want to thank you for that,
Yo,
Charles,
what is our topic today, mother?
Charles, please
in the chalice.
Please don't get me, Charles. I'm just kidding, okay?
Uh-huh.
But I hear you. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing, and I will not pad it or add anything else to it. That's all. And I'm glad that we are all well. We are all well in mind, body, and spirit, and we are here. So let's jump into today's topic. We're talking about overtime pay for teachers who we know work way more than 40 hours a week. So here's some info for you. Right. So the U.S. Department of Labor is considering raising the minimum salary threshold for worker exemptions under the Fair Labor Standards Act by about 55%. Okay. Toya's talking trash. I gotta see what she's saying. I'll come back to you, Toya. Hi. All right. So that means that
I think she's taking credit for my emotional intelligence now. Everybody's taking, hey, well, take credit when I make a mistake. Continue, please.
Oh, later on the show, I was about to get to that, just randomly interjecting how I take credit for other people's intelligence.
Yes.
I was just gonna do it randomly, just for the sake of it.
Oh gosh, what have I done? What have I done? I know this is not over, Charles. I know it's not over. I know he's gonna say something passive aggressive. It's gonna come.
Jubilee, you have a show to lead. You have to focus.
I'm leading.
What are we talking about?
I'm leading. I get to do it my way.
That's true.
My way. Okay.
Yep.
That's some Frank Sinatra shit right there.
Okay. Yes. All right. So this means that more non-teaching employees would qualify for overtime pay if they work more than 40 hours a week. The rule could affect workers like librarians and aides who aren't assisting in classrooms. And so there's a whole public, I think it's actually closed now, but there was a public comment open so people could go and sort of give their feedback around this. Currently, eligible employees are eligible, it's kind of restating that, for overtime pay if they earn less than $35,308 a year. The Labor Department has proposed raising the threshold to $55,068 or $1,059 weekly. Okay, but there's a regulatory exemption for doctors, lawyers, and teachers. Last year, the median salary for doctors was $229,300. $29,300, and the median salary for lawyers was $135,740. And this is the National Education Association's documentation. The first year salary range for a teacher is between $36,163 and $52,823. The median pay for teachers currently is $66,397 with no opportunity to earn over that or to earn overtime. And so the first question is overtime pay for teachers. Is it overdue or overrated? Is overtime something that teachers should be able to receive, right? Given the countless hours they dedicate outside of the 40-hour work week, or should the salary just be enough? And I'm going to throw it to Omar first.
Okay. You want to throw this shit to me first. I'm not going to get too far into it because I know we're just kind of taking our initial discussions. Listen, there's no one that's going to be listening to the show, and there's no one that's going to be on the show that's going to say that teachers don't deserve more pay, and they certainly don't deserve overtime, all right? Like, everyone's going to say that. Like, who's going to sit there and be like, yo, man, like, F these teachers? And if they do, like, a little weird, right? So I'm going to put on a different hat. I'm going to put on less of my teacher hat, of which I know our audience knows that I taught, and more of my CEO and superintendent hat. And I'm going to be like, cool, where are you going to get the money for this? Because that there in turn lies like the age-old question of, this is a great idea, but how are we going to fund it? And then ultimately, like, I want to ask, not just how are we going to fund it, how are we going to keep track of this in a way that is responsible? All right. Like, here's what I oftentimes see. Like, yes, teachers work their behinds off. They are constantly working. When I was a teacher, yo, man, I remember being in the classroom until midnight a lot of times. And this is back in the day, dude. Like, I'm sitting there crunching numbers on an Excel spreadsheet to figure out like proficiency levels for our kids and figuring out like where do they stand and how many of the proficiency standards have they garnered. Like, I'm doing this shit by hand, right? I'm doing lesson plans at night. I'm doing lesson plans in the afternoons, after school, on the weekends. How do you keep track of those hours, right, in a ethical way? Because like, I can absolutely be like, yo, I spent 3 hours lesson planning this weekend, or I can be like, oh, overtime pay? I spent 9 hours. And how do you then ethically regulate and correct that in a way so that teachers are getting compensated, but also like, you know, listen, man, corruption's abound. And like, I live in a city where like superintendents have gone to jail. And city council people have gone to jail. So my pushback is less about should we and more about how do we actually accomplish this. And I'd love to hear from the audience, particularly on this issue, because this is where I really, want to put up a couple of impediments here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Doc, like you got like a magic wand, you're going to regulate this shit. You got a way to do this.
Nah,
Castillo,
man.
you ran to school. How the hell are you going to do this?
Yeah, you might want to go to David. I mean, I'll get out the way for David because I don't really have anything profound to say. I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it. Like I just don't. If that's how it ends up working out, and that's and people figure it out, and that's a regulation, and you got to kind of deal with it. I think that I think the reason why the question is such a hot topic or whatever is because it's always controversy. It's always controversial. Like that's like, hey, well, how's the pay schedule going to work out? Some people get paid in the summer. Some people, have their checks a little bit fatter for those 9 months. And then, like there's an interesting pay structure there that's pretty intricate. And I think that they are really, as somebody who's ran a company and somebody who's helped run a district, I think there are a lot of questions that have to be asked about that. I think everything you said, Omar. But I guess the one thing that I'll say that is controversial, I don't like talking about groups in totality. I don't like saying teachers this or whatever the case is, because I got a really bad education, and if I'm going off of that type of experience, and I'm conflating those things, it's like, well, man, like, and it's a sin if I say, like, can we tie it to some type of how well you do at your job, like and I think that even that concept is sinful to people, and I don't want to be disrespectful. It's not something that I care enough to be fighting about. So we gonna see where the land drops, and it's gonna take its course.
So you're talking about merit-based pay, or is that what you're referring to?
I'm saying that I don't care enough about the topic, and I'm not trying to be flippant, right? Like, I just know that, like, you got to pick your battles. I think there are questions and there's ways I can support it either way. But no, has anybody asked the question, well, why are these particular jobs like not included in that originally? Like, what is the reason? What's the rationale for that? Like, I'm sure there was some talk and discussion about it. So I mean, I think that the current market of education is a trade-off. I think that teachers are not paid very well. I don't know if that's the full reason that education in this country is so bad for Black people and poor people and brown people. And I also know that the barrier of entry to becoming a surgeon is very, very, very different than that of becoming a teacher in the United States. So, I mean, David might have a much better answer. I'm just saying, like, I can see the argument either way, but I don't have an impassioned response, I guess. So
I think so I was a teacher also for many years, and I was a principal for longer than I was a teacher. I would say with my principal hat on, it's a complicated, so we tried to do outcomes based, like merit pay. It was pretty easy to track with data, but it was still complicated. And I think overtime is also, it just kind of gives me I get freaked out because it can be very complicated from an employment perspective, just like operationally. Now you are saying to the teacher that their home is a work site. And then, like, does that mean that we have to buy them a desk and a chair? What if they hurt themselves at home while they're working? So I think my brain goes there first. I think the bigger issue is like just overall compensation, and we'll probably get into that. So I think for me, it's complicated. When I was a teacher, what I would do is try and figure out different ways to become more efficient in my planning, so that maybe I had like 1 or 2 like long days where I worked at school and then I worked at home. I'm like, over the weekend I'll do some work to get ready for Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday I'm gonna pull a long day to get through Thursday and Friday, right? And I built it into my schedule. It was kind of my weekly plan. And whenever I could, I would use technology. And I think the tech tools that are available today can help teachers to become even way more efficient, so that they're not forced to work outside of the school day. I mean, they're probably still going to have to do it, but there are ways, and I think that's maybe something that people could be doing through like professional development, like doing some work in professional development around how to create more efficient systems, so that you can still have a life, once you leave the school.
So like, I don't know, like before, sorry, Jubilee, like I want you to jump back in, but like this becomes like the age-old question of whether or not like we should be paying teachers just outrightly more because we feel that teachers should get paid more, or if there is in fact a mechanism to pay teachers, those who go above and beyond and do these things, right? So like a lot of schools have stipends if you're like, leading a club. You like we pay for tutoring. So if there is, so I know Nicole came in, which is badass. If our teachers are doing tutoring after school and it is our teachers, we're absolutely paying them for that tutoring time. And I actually have an idea about how this would work and where the funding would come from. But I think this gets into that like marred debate about not just like paying teachers more and stuff, but ultimately like you're right about one thing, which is it gets back into what activities do we find this as? How do you control for this? How do you make it equitable? How do you stop infighting? Because like, I was that teacher that was working a ton. It was like, okay, cool. Like I work, let's just say 10 hours overtime this week, which is demonstrably small. And then someone comes in and like, I know they did. And they're like, yeah, I worked 10 hours over week 2. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it becomes a huge Pandora's box as to what defines this and what doesn't. And then how do you keep this constraint? Not to mention the fact that like state governments are pretty tight right now. Like I don't know how they feel about increasing budgets or not. And like, then it gets to the district level and like, what do the districts do about this? I got a lot of questions about this, but Jubilee, I know you got something to jump in. And
of course, my brain's going, but I'm just like, hey, we got people on the moon. I'm just saying. So when we're talking about like how are we gonna pay for this, how are we gonna figure it out? It's like, okay, well, we've been through worse.
Yo, but did we? I don't know, man. I heard Stanley Cooper.
We figured it out. People, they went up there, they brought rocks back. People live up there for months at a time eating pellets. I'm just saying, like, what are we talking about? Like, that question really boggles me. It really does. And I do understand what you're saying in terms of just like regulating it, because we know, people lie, people pad numbers and all of that. I get it, but it can't be that. It just can't be that hard. I do think it's a both and though, like in terms of like raising the salary, like it's just too low. It's just too low. And I hear what you're saying, Charles, in terms of like the pathway being different and maybe not as rigorous as what it takes to become, a doctor or a surgeon, but I mean, it's not easy either, thinking that you got to get a couple of degrees. First of all, to even be, promoted on a pay scale for a teacher, you've got to get a master's degree, unless you're like making pennies. And then you got to take a bunch of tests, right? So, I mean, that's a whole nother story in terms of certification, because I think it's kind of too hard in the testing area and not challenging enough.
See, I didn't say that. I said I didn't care, and if you want to have a raise, What I'm saying is that there are going to be questions that come with that. What I'm saying is that here we are again having another adult conversation, which is fine. We can have an adult conversation, but like, is the reading level for Black kids still going to be the same? And then is it always going to just be, well, we can't necessarily solve this problem? Well, there's going to be poverty. There's going to be racism. There are going to be these things, and yet and still, Black kids, brown kids, and poor kids still need to learn. When you sign up to be a firefighter, you know that you are about to be running into burning buildings. So when you sign up to be an urban educator, you know that there are these things that are here happening. And again, I love teachers, and I respect them. I didn't say that nobody deserved anything. What I was saying was,
I didn't say that.
No, you said about the money, like where will we find it? And what I'm saying is, I'm sure you probably can find it, right? Like, I think it can probably definitely be found. What I'm saying is that it is going to spark other conversations that seem to be taboo. Anytime you ask an additional question about performance, about effectiveness, efficiency, as far as educating those that look like us on this podcast, those that, like, you know, have the, you know, all of us grew up in somewhat, like, you know, meager means, right? Like, I hear that. I guess I'm more interested in that conversation of what is going to change for America's, like, most disenfranchised young people. That
right.
But if they want the raise, give them the damn raise. I don't care. But
it's not just about it's really not just a money conversation, right? It is for me, it is about quality, which is why I was saying it is a both and kind of thing, right? It is about the raise, but it is also about conversation and competency and effectiveness in the classroom. And Omar, Dave, you can chime in, right? But I ran a charter school and I led in many charter schools. And the reason that we were able to get the best of the best, even as a first year teacher, we already know, like, you're not at the top of the game yet because you still have to develop your skill set. However, the willingness, right, and the understanding that I am essentially going to be running into a burning building as a teacher because of the population that I'm serving. I know that this is going to weigh more heavily on me. More will likely be required of me because of the community that I am choosing to serve and teach in. And I'm cool with that. And what's also cool is being able to look at that teacher who, if they had gone to a neighboring district school to do the same job with the same population of students, that they're going to make $10,000, $15,000 more and still be able to make per session, right? If they tutor or do anything outside of their role, which usually teachers are asked to do things that are outside of their role, right? And so that's why I don't think it's just a one thing. I think it's a both and I think that by having conversations about raising salary, I think it opens the door for having conversations about performance and effectiveness in the classroom, because and I've said it on here before that teaching is probably one of the only professions where that is taboo. You don't go to a doctor and it's like, oh, you know, my foot's hurting. And they're like, oh, let me give you a manicure. Like, let me put some nail polish on it. You'd be like, what's going on? Or a foot doctor, he's like, hey, let me look at your heart. Right. So it's like, no, we are looking for you to be an expert in this field. I came to you for my heart. I want solutions for my heart. We want teachers that are going in the classroom able to provide high quality, effective instruction.
Yeah.
Black and brown children and for all.
Wait. Hold on for a second. I'm not supposed to be going to the podiatrist for my heart situation?
No.
But he told me he went to upstairs medical college.
Okay.
I think the money definitely, whether it comes in the form of overtime or just like a higher base salary situation, it does help bring people in. It helps to pique interest. It helps to, you know, get people to the interview table. It can help tip the scales when people are deciding where they want to work. And it also has, like, demonstrably shown to help with retention, right? But that's just the starting point, right? I mean, that just gets you like the people that you want to have, that you need to have to run your school or run your district, right? There's a whole bunch, so many other things that have to happen. So it's kind of, I agree, it is a starting point. Going back to like the money piece, like, you know, I mean, I've heard people, maybe I have I'm going to admit that I have a biased view of this, because most of my education career was spent working in and around a school district that had some of the lowest outcomes for Black and brown children in the country. In the state, still does, right? Now they say, oh, it's whole child. I'm like, well, part of the whole child is academics. So you're not doing whole child. Anyways. And they're totally inefficient. They're running like, you know, I don't know, upwards of like 70 sites, physical sites. When you actually look at the number of children that are enrolling in their schools, different districts in California, maybe we're running 40 sites, right? So too many sites, not enough kids, totally inefficient. So I agree, there's money there, but we also, if we're going to talk about higher salaries, overtime, whatever, it needs to also come with the conversation around academic accountability and operational and fiscal accountability for charter schools and large districts and any kind of entity receiving these funds. And we never do. We let them. There's schools in Oakland and LA and San Francisco that have had 0 or 5% proficient kids in high school. And it's just okay. Those schools, they are allowed to exist. Throwing more money at that problem is not going to help those children learn, right? So,
I can chime in after you, Omar. Yeah, I don't want to cut you off.
And they're throwing money at those schools.
So, I mean, look, everyone wants to talk about the age-old money situation. Everyone wants to talk about that. And listen, I'm going to get back to Nicole really quick and be like, listen, even as a superintendent, I can tell you that it depends on the money issue, all right? So I actually think that a government program that's federally sponsored, we got federal grants, all right? For those of you that know your school biz, there's Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV. Without getting too far into it, for those of you that may not be fully in the know, the federal government has almost zero authority when it comes to education. All right. What the federal government does is basically collect money and disperse it through a series of grants. That is really what the federal government does, because the states are the ones who control the law, how education is done in their particular states. So education law can look very different from California to Texas. And this is what we talk about on the show. I personally think that within the grant system at the federal government, hey, let's not pay for, this $1.3 trillion submarine and maybe throw that into federal education and use that as grant systems for increased time and effort, which is something that the federal government already does under the grant system. So the system to control for that, or at least regulate that, is there. But this is what I get into. It's why are teachers needing overtime to begin with? And this is, I think, what Jubilee and David touched on, which is look, I think the way that we're doing education sucks. And we talk about it a ton on the show, but I think it gives pause for me to say, by giving teachers overtime, which again, I think is something that should be done, are we putting a Band-Aid on the situation that is a gaping wound, which is, I think, again, and we touched upon this, I think during one of our previous shows where I talked about the credit system, the Carnegie credit system. And for those of you that remember high school, you get credits. This is how you wind up getting, enough credits to graduate and so forth. But it's boring as hell. You go class to class, it sucks shit. Teachers are sitting there talking the whole time. And if we rethought the way that we did our educational system, to where, students are doing the heavy lift. Teachers are able to utilize their time in the classroom to make sure that they're prepared, so that they had time during the day to ensure their preparedness. They're making much more student-centered led activities. So students are doing the heavy lift, teachers are not. Therefore, giving teachers, again, greater time to work in small groups, greater time to plan for the next session, giving teachers a bit more prep time. I don't know if we'd have this discussion about overtime. I think that overtime is a symptom, if you will, of just ineffective models of education that we all continuously use without even thinking about how do we actually redesign this whole thing to make it more effective. And I mean, we could talk all day long about that shit. But Doc, I know you had something to say.
No, I think this is why I don't like hypotheticals, though, right? Because it just leaves out a bunch of just details that are really important and germane to the conversation. So, when before Brown versus Board of Education, it was hypothetically, what we want is equitable schools. What we want is to get rid of this separate but equal. And what ended up happening was you ended up effectively closing all these Black schools. You fired the entire, for the most part, virtually the entire Black teaching force that we're still trying to. I just came from an event called Black Male Educators Convening, because there's less than 2% of all teachers are Black men. And we're talking about an industry right now that's 80% white, mostly women, that are serving Black and brown kids and failing at an alarming rate. Absolutely, there are Black and brown people in there and white people that care a lot about what they're doing. But as somebody who was I know I keep leaning on this district thing, but I'm gonna tell you. So let's say we got it. We got a raise and we got overtime. I'm gonna give you both. I'm gonna tell you exactly how we would get that in Oakland, right? You close 30, 35 schools, we can easily do that. Oakland has a dwindling student population. Schools are not full. And you have a lot of teachers, and there's a lot of central office services that people want. You want social workers, you want therapists, you want these things. That's central office, right? Like, and we have those things. I've worked in a place where we gave people exactly what they was asking for, and then in return, when you say I want to see something different here, then it goes back to being like, well, you don't appreciate the profession. You don't appreciate that. What I'm saying is get your more pay and get your overtime. And with those things also comes more accountability and responsibility. Like, again, we're talking when people talk about what doctors get, doctors also have to have malpractice insurance. Lawyers also have to, like, you can be disbarred for doing a poor job over and over and over again. And sadly, the teaching profession has been a parking lot and a cadre for a lot of white women in this country to come into these neighborhoods and not have to talk about any type of accountability. But anytime we bring it up, it is a black face or a brown face that gets put up there. So it seems like you're going against your own people. I am just asking, what would that benefit for these black and brown kids? And can we mark it? And can we check on it? And if it don't change, is something else going to happen? That's really the larger point that I'm trying to make. I'm all for people getting more money.
So let me add a story here real quick. So when I was principal at Unity High School in Oakland, East Oakland, California, we like survey teachers every year, 2 times a year, and we saw this theme coming up about burnout, about money, and so we reworked our master schedule so teachers had more prep time. Right, that's important during the school day. We bumped salaries up, but we also said that we were going to start to tie pay to outcomes, right? And it was like a bargain. It was like, we'll do these things, and then we're going to do exactly what Charles is talking about, which is like, we're going to monitor. Like, if we're going to do this, if we're going to give you more time to plan, if you're going to have fewer classes to prep for, forget the money. Like, we should see student outcomes rise, and they did. The other story I want to add here is, like, so thinking about things that don't cost money, right? We often say, charter schools are innovative, and compared to district schools, nowadays I see districts doing more innovation. Not talking about technology, but the charter school that we visited last week, as a potential high school for my son, they've been around they started in '98, right? And they did it because they wanted to innovate. And one of their biggest innovations it cost money, because it cost more. They had to hire more teachers. But check this out. Instead of doing a traditional high school 6-period schedule, they moved to a 2 like half-year kind of blocks, and instead of having 6 classes, students only had 4 classes, right? So instead of being able to just take 6 classes, now you can take 8, but they're longer blocks, like 90-minute blocks or something like that. And so, but they also, in one of those additional classes, they made sure that students take math continuously throughout the year, just so they don't lose it. If you're a teacher, that means you went from teaching 5 classes and 1 prep to teaching 3 and a 90-minute prep daily, right? I mean, just making the workday so much easier, better flow. You can do so much more planning. And I think, they have a crazy high retention rate for staff, because it feels like the teachers at that school, when they go home, like, they can go home, right? Because they have the dedicated work time during the day. And there's all kinds of benefits for students, but that's an investment. It costs them money in that they had to hire up to cover some more classes. But at the end of the day, like, teachers are really happy with it, and it's not a raise, it's not overtime, right? So there are things that can be done. It's just a matter of like figuring out like who's doing these things and you know, trying to replicate if possible. I was kind of blown away. I was like, wow, why didn't I ever think of that?
I would hope that that teachers are educators, the smartest people would be able to actually innovate and find interesting ways to educate people.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jude.
Yep.
I'm like multitasking over here. No, I agree with what David is saying, and that's kind of where my mind was as well, because I've seen it done, right? To answer your question in terms of that high level of accountability. And again, I chose to be a principal of a charter school for this very reason, because I wanted to be in a place where I could really impact change. And people go, oh, why didn't you go to district school? You know, you got the union, this and that. And it's like, yeah, the bane of any leader who really wants to be progressive and do what's right for children. You know, when you have to constantly grapple with, you know, the union and all of these different demands that really put adults first and not children first, it's, you know, it's a headache. So that's why I chose to lead in a charter school. And so having, being able to look at a budget, like David said, figure out, you know, what's a bit excessive or what can we rework so that we can make sure that kids are getting what they get or they need, right? And make sure that the salary is supple, like, so that no one's dying, right? The school day I had was a 7:15 to 4:15 school day, right? But we were able to fit in, like David said, we had 90-minute blocks for planning time, right? So that what you were in there for, first of all, you were already getting paid so anywhere between 10 to 15% higher than someone at a district school. But when you left at 4:15, it's your choice if you wanted to work at home, but likely you had some time in the school day to do that work, right? And so we didn't have to necessarily pay out a bunch of overtime because the salary was, you know, enough, right? And the time was also enough. And because of the fact that we were paying higher, that conversation of accountability was there at the table, right? During interviews, teachers knew coming in. And so when I think about, I talk about charter.
Was your school unionized?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's why I chose in New York. Charter schools are not unionized. That's what I'm saying. Like when I think
some of them are, they start. I mean, I think some of them are.
Might be one. There's not many, not in New York.
But I think that's a key. I want you to finish, but that's a key point, and I'll make my point after you finish.
Well, yes, I do believe it's a key point, which is why my brain goes around charter schools and their initial purpose, which was supposed to be like a laboratory, right? To figure out like how can we shift the educational landscape in favor of children to make sure that they're getting what they need. And then, you know, it popped off all across the country and maybe all across the world. And it's like, but what did we glean from that improved our practices, that removed red tape, bureaucracy, and made sure that kids are getting what they need? And so one of the pieces of that, yes, I know that there in some places they have unionized charter schools, but many of them are not. I have seen many charter schools, right? I can name at least 10 right now that they have students that are thriving, right? And they pay their teachers more than the district school. They have grants and funds, and they have access to, you know, a little bit of funds that maybe a traditional district school does not. But the point is that a higher salary, high level of accountability. It goes hand in hand, right? And the expectation that you are a teacher and you're in this classroom with these students, black, brown, white, purple, you're here to get results and make sure that these are getting the high quality education they deserve. And that's period.
I 1,000% agree. I 1,000% agree. But that you made my point. You're talking about like, you're talking about a school system that is not unionized, that actually does not require you to have a teaching credential. Parochial schools, charter schools, you can teach in those schools without, there's a reason that a whole bunch of nuns can teach that ain't never went to or took any of those tests, right? This larger conversation is talking about the vast majority of public schools, which are traditional public schools that all have a union. I don't know what the market share is. I know when I started this, it was like less than 20% of all schools were charter schools. And I think that was even being conservative, right? We tried to do something like this in Oakland. we tried to attract the best teachers to go to the worst schools. We offered higher pay. We offered to do Saturday school and after school programs, and we offered bonuses for student achievement. And you know who shut that down? Unions. The union shut it down. The union didn't even let the conversation continue. And so that what I'm saying is,
yeah,
and I'm saying this more to the people that don't work in education the way that we do. Like when you are in one of those systems, if you are at a Catholic school, you can pay whatever you want. You know what else you can do? Like Jubilee, she can keep quality teachers better. Because you know why? She can fire people. If you don't you can fire people when they're not doing what they need to do.
Absolutely.
You can't do it. So when this thing that we're talking about, this hypothetical, if it goes into place like that, you can't do those things. That's why the rubber room exists. That's why all these other, and David and them can explain the rubber room to people that don't get it. But I'll just end right there. David, you can take it. I 1000% agree with what Jubilee said, which is why my stance is my stance. You can have that conversation in a charter Catholic school, parochial type of environment that you cannot have or broach in a traditional public district.
Yep. And I think that the money conversation should be tied to the conversation around the professionalization of the teaching profession, right? And if you are a professional in whatever it is that you do, you have to be able to demonstrate, your clear impact. You're a doctor. Are you getting patients healthy? How long is it taking? Are they relapsing? Are they coming back in? Are they dying? And I think with teaching, it's pretty simple. It's not like our kids showing up. It's not our kids like healthy. It's not really the role of the school. It's, are they learning, right? And we have tons of assessments where we should be looking at that data. And so I think yes to more money, yes to professionalizing the occupation, but also we have to talk about accountability, like having, and this is, for people that aren't in education, like we have large school systems that are not educating children. They are coming to school every day. They're going home. They're spending so much time in these systems, and there's zero learning outcomes for these kids. And it's worse for Black and brown kids. So I think the other quick thing I want to offer here is it's a hack. It does cost a little money, but you've been in schools. We've all been in schools. We've led schools. You have a sense of like your staff. You know when people are. You can tell when people are burning out, right? They're like, Omar, how you doing? I can tell you're looking. You're about to, whatever. But you talk to teachers, right? And you get a sense of like if they're working too hard, working too long. And something simple that we used to do is be like, hey, you know what? Come to work tomorrow, Omar, but we're going to get a sub for you. You're gonna work in the office. We're going to find a place for you to get caught up, right? Get some traction. Because if you're teaching, sometimes if you're running a school, sometimes you just feel like you're just running right in front of a wave, right? You need a little bit of time. So we're going to get you a sub. You're going to be here on campus, and you're going to get caught up. You're going to do some planning, right? Maybe meet with me, the principal, and talk about how we can make things more efficient for you. What supports do you need? That costs the money of a sub, but it's also something that it's a pretty easy thing to help. Not if you have a big systemic issue, but when you have teachers that are kind of underwater, it's something that can really help them.
So can you put that question on how can students get freedom from these unionized educational systems? Good question. I don't even know if I don't know if we'll see it in this lifetime. I really don't.
Like the power, man.
They're so powerful. But what I can say is there are ways to work around the union. There are ways to work in partnership with the union. I've seen it. I've had to do it. Right. And it's also why I chose to lead as a principal in a charter school, because there was so much red tape and maneuvering just to get one thing approved or one thing done. But the same thing that I ended up doing in a charter school, we did in a district school. We had to push for data-driven instruction, right? We built a whole system, right? Figure out behavior management and what was going to be the school-wide, initiative for that. So yes, teachers can only stay this long or come in. They can't come in before this time, and they've got to get. So it's not impossible. It just makes it more challenging to kind of get to, you know, the end result that you're looking for, the desired outcome. But I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetime. And the other thing I wanted to add is there have been shifts. I can't speak to, you know, every state, but I do know that in New York there were shifts when a rebargaining, you know, conversation came up for bargaining salaries, and it was talking about increase. It also opened up conversation about performance. And so in New York, they instituted, right, these different pieces, these different data pieces for the end of the year connected to student performance. And though it didn't necessarily impact your salary, it did impact your end of year rating, which teachers also care about, you know? So again, I know Charles said he doesn't like hypotheticals. I get it. But I think that money might be the leverage that we need to really have in-depth conversations and move this forward. I think it impacts all of it.
I think well, Omar got to go. So Omar.
Yeah, I apologize, everybody. I got to bounce out early, but I just wanted to thank everybody for a great show. Thank you to our audience, man. Badass commentary. And just kind of quick last thought is that I think this discussion was awesome because it really starts tearing away at the onion of what is really behind some of the issues that are prevalent in current day education. And while I talk the discussion about like how do we get students free from the unionized educational systems, I mean, like, listen, like we've started. And I hate to be like the bearer of bad news and so forth, but like I'm an advocate of the charter system clearly because I run one. And while I'm all for the unionization of people for solid workers' rights, I feel like the teacher unions have gotten their prioritization is no longer about learning and students. And there are ways about doing this. The truth is that like you bring up a really creative idea, like EPLA has, I think, a really creative way of incentivizing teachers with pay that is not an arguably like, oh, like we're just going to dump a bunch of money at this English teacher because this English teacher had gains. We've created an entire system where teams are benefiting. So the entire sixth grade team has decided, by the way, themselves. So this was something that the teachers had an enormous amount of input on, where we're like, hey, how do you want to do this? So if this teacher gets incentivized, and the teachers themselves and the English teachers are like, I can't do this alone. So I may get like, you know, a certain percentage of this pay, 30%, so forth. But then the team gets spread out this huge level of pay because it then incentivizes those other teachers to then perform really well and have those gains, because the more teachers that get into this incentive program, the higher the pay is going to be for the team. And what it does is incentivize cooperation amongst the team. And this is just a microcosm for our audience to be like, creative solutions exist. The unions, yes, have a very terrible time of destroying them, but it's to say that we as people have to realize that, like as Dr. Cole would say, no one's going to come save us. No one's going to come solve this. We have to start solving this themselves. And yet another plug for South Star Classroom. Like, yeah, man, we got solutions. That's what we've got a show. That's why we can come out and help you all out. But on that note, I want to thank the Bearded Wisdom, David Castillo, the doc, the real doctor, Dr. Charles Cole, and our queen, Ms. Ransom. I love our check-ins. I love our check-ins. I love hearing how you're doing.
I don't.
Our audience. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, happy Indigenous Day. But really a shout out to our audience, that I'm thankful for you all and for our families and the people keeping it real. So I'm out of here. I hope you guys have a great rest of the show.
All right.
Yeah. Peace. I think again, like what we're talking about, what we're saying, this is why I don't like hypotheticals, right? Because again, it's a thought experience, but there's a lot of key things that are missing, and we're like that. The OEA, the Oakland Education Association, fleeces OUSD every few years, like, and don't close schools, okay, all right, well, you still want all the services from for the extra services, you want more pay. I think they put in housing into this one, like they said. What did they do? They did OEA added so much stuff into that contract discussion this year. I mean, in that last in the last set of discussion.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it's not it's hard to even have that kind of engaging conversation. So again, I just for our listeners that don't work in these spaces, that have not had to be in those rooms for those conversations and discussions, I just want you to understand a union's job, especially school units, it is not your kids' education quality. It is not instruction. It is a union's job is to protect and advocate for its workers. All right. So when the NBA Players Union is going at Adam Silver, like they are talking about the players first, not the quality of basketball, not the users at home. And I just think it's really important that you understand how these political process. And again, I know you can do these things respectfully. I'm not disrespecting the union. I want people just to understand what that apparatus is. Go read your local union's contract and what's in there and what they can and can't do. So that was the larger point that I was making. But I did think that it was important, Jubilee, to discern that you are talking about leading at a charter school, that you are in a different type of structural place, that the vast majority of students that we're talking about and parents, that's not what they're dealing with. So I just thought that was important.
Yes, I mean, I agree that it's important.
Go to a local school, go to a local traditional school, and supervise the way that you supervise at your charter school.
I did. That's what I told you.
And how was that?
That's what I said. It's transferable. The skill set is transferable, but the autonomy is higher at a charter school, which is why I chose to lead as a principal. Most of my career was in a district school, right?
Mm-hmm.
I served as an AP in a district school. And when it was time for me to decide that I was going to become principal, I went to charter because I had some experience there. And the reason was because of the autonomy. And I knew what I was doing. And I could have went to a district school to be principal, but I didn't want to because I wanted to be able to make decisions for children without having to hop over barbed wire fences.
Yeah.
So that's that. So
I agree with you so much.
I mean, I have the experience in both. I just think that, even if we take away performance and effectiveness, which, right, do we really believe that teachers are paid enough for the work that they do? Right. Even outside, let's just say, because, and I know that you said you spoke about your education, Charles, right? I had an okay education, right? I had some teachers that went hard. I had some teachers that did not care. I had teachers that were taking 7 medications in front of us in the classroom. Like, so I got a really mixed experience, right? But when you think about what a teacher does, right? Let's just assume that the baseline is that at least you're mediocre, right? Is it enough? Is $35,000 enough? $45,000 enough?
It's not $35,000 everywhere. Like, let's just be.
No, it's not. That's why I gave the range earlier, right? 35 to 53 is the range, somewhere around there, right? But I'm saying, is that enough for what a teacher does, right? Baseline, they at least care about kids, right? They plan, they come in, they teach all day, they go home. Is it enough?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly not enough. And I think at the same time, especially considering some of the data that you shared at the beginning around the average salaries, right? You talked about doctors and lawyers, right? Sure, make them exempt from overtime or whatever, right? The teaching salary is way off of that scale, right? And but I still don't think that overtime pay is going to get us there. I think that's incredibly complicated. I do think teachers need to get paid more, and I think when we have that conversation, these would be my closing thoughts. When we start to have that conversation around teacher pay, we shouldn't throw money at into bad systems, right? We should put more money, allocate more resources into our school systems, while at the same time making sure that we are treating the teaching profession as a profession. The working in schools, counseling teams, operations people, security staff, everybody, training, professional development. Let people thrive in their jobs, provide them with the resources so they can thrive in their jobs, And then you have to ensure that the money is actually making a difference. That could look however it looks, but you know, I mean, it's crazy to think that we're pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into large public education systems, and when somebody says, you know, show me what you got, show me your impact, like there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And in some cases, you know, well, I won't go on that tangent, but I think we have to have that conversation. And again, my lens is biased. I spent a lot of time in Oakland, in San Francisco, and those school systems, you know, unfortunately, just yeah, I don't know how you could have a school with you know, 5% reading and 5% math and be like, yeah, this is a good school. It's just not. Period. Right? You're doing a disservice to children. So
yeah, I would just so we can norm on numbers. Here go the numbers for Oakland. Starting teachers in Oakland, like, is around starting teacher around 70K.
Yeah. Wow.
Starting salary for firefighters in Oakland, just around 74K. Starting for nurses in Oakland, if you are a CN, $30,000. If you are an RN, a registered nurse, 77K. And then if you are a nurse practitioner, for those that don't know, like a nurse practitioner is like having a doctorate of nursing. Like you are kind of leading that. I mean, you basically run the hospital. They come in at around 111. They would be the principals of nurses, so to speak, right? So, and again, cost of living is crazy in the Bay or whatever, but I'm trying to give parity around certain like professions. And yeah, and I do think that when we talk about this in society, I do think that teachers are not paid a lot. And I think that the trade-off is, I think that people allow teachers to kind of get that off their chest. Like, we are disrespected, we this, like, I don't think people don't always, like, you know, there's some type of reverence on some level for that place. You don't really see that same type of reverence for like firefighters. You just don't. And firefighters do a lot. I don't know if people do.
But you know what?
Everything firefighters do.
When there's a fire, they put the fire out.
Yeah. They don't just put the fire out. They are first responders. They When you call 911, most of the time, firefighters is the people that's showing up to your crib. And then and nurses, like, and what nurses do and what they have to do and how they get certification. And I do think teachers should look at nurses, because when I was in undergrad, that's when they were having the same discussion around nurses and how to better professionalize that career. And some of that stuff worked. And that's why since then, nursing programs are impacted and all throughout CSUs, and they have been. Teaching is not. And so I think, you know, looking at those things I just think for scalability, and again, California is expensive as hell. I want to put that there. But I just thought that would be interesting fodder for the conversation, so you're not having it in a vacuum.
Understood. Any final thoughts? Because I don't have any more.
I'm good. Yeah, got me thinking about this topic, which is good. Yeah, good conversation. Thank you, Jubilee.
My final thought: pay him. Give him. I don't care. Give him all the money in the world. Do that. That's fine. Just don't forget to ask if kids is learning. And if they get to take credit for when kids learn, then hold them accountable when they don't.
Well, thank you. This has been episode 119. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jubilee. That's David. That's Charles. Have a good evening.